Good evening, everybody. Welcome to
Good
this
evening.
Google Hangout session on discuss the implications of the RTI Amendments Bill with Mr. Jai Panda, Member of Parliament from Kendrapada, Odisha. I'm Aarti Mohan, editor of The Alternative, a media platform focusing on citizen action around sustainability and social impact. I'm happy to have here with me my co-hosts for this evening's Google Hangout, Bhanupriya Rao, a campaigner, and one of the people who's been very closely involved with the RTI MP call-a-thon recently on the RTI Amendments Bill. My other co-host is Anshul Tiwari from Youth Ki Awaaz, who will be joining us shortly. Youth Ki Awaaz is a platform that seeks to express the views of the youth in this country. So, for a quick recap about what we're going to be talking about today, the first ever amendment proposed to the historic RTI Act, the RTI Amendments Bill, was introduced in Lok Sabha on August 12th, seeking to insert an explanation in Section 2 stating that any association or body of individuals registered or recognized as political party will not be considered a public authority. The amendment comes in the wake of a June CIC order under the Transparency Law, with terming 6 political parties as public bodies. In the Google Hangout today, we are honored to have Mr. Jai Panda, who has been very vocal about his stand against the proposed RTI Amendments Bill. Jai Panda has written an open letter to the Speaker of the Parliament asking to stall the vote on the Amendments Bill, refer it to a standing committee, and open it up for wider and detailed discussions. Joining Mr. Jai Panda today are Anjali Bharadwaj, co-convener at the National Campaign for People's Right to Information. She has been associated for a very long time with the RTI movement in India. She is also she's also part of the Satark Nagarik Sangathan. Her is Venkatesh Nayak, who is the program coordinator of the Commonwealth Human Rights Initiative, and also a co-convener of the National Campaign for People's Right to Information, NCPRI. And Rakesh Reddy. Rakesh Reddy is an active RTI activist. He has filed hundreds of RTI applications himself and has helped over 10,000 people use the RTI Act effectively today. Before I pass on the mic to my co-host Bhanupriya Rao, I'd like to thank the office of Mr. Jai Panda, the National Campaign for People's Right to Information, the NCPRI, the Satark Nagarik Sangathan, the RTI MP call-a-thon volunteers, the Commonwealth Human Rights Initiative, CHRI, for making this hangout possible. Over to Bhanupriya Rao to tell us what citizens have been doing in order to raise their voice against the RTI Amendments Bill, and then to welcome Mr. Jai Panda into the hangout. Over to you, Bhanupriya.
Well, thank you, Aarti. It was a rather lovely introduction, and you set out the context really well as to why we're doing this hangout and why it is so urgent, actually, because partly because of the urgency with which these amendments are. I mean, the amendment bill has been introduced. And the amendments are being brought about in the Parliament. They were introduced on the 12th of August, and if God forbid all goes well, then they will perhaps be passed tomorrow, which is when it is listed, unless we've heard of something that has happened in the last 2 hours. The Parliament's got adjourned and the business is shifted to the next day or the day after or whatever. As citizens, we've been very, very active, partly because we do realize the importance of the RTI Act and the kind of power it has given to the citizens of the country to question their governments, to sort of make governance accountable and transparent. It's given a massive voice to the people. So when we citizens, apart from all the campaigning that NCPRI and CHRI and everybody else has been doing, when we heard of these amendments and the urgency with which they've been brought in, and most of us living abroad, we thought, well, we cannot join a protest in the country. We cannot. What's the best way? Rather, we could get involved with this, and we came about with an idea of RTI Call-a-thon, which was basically an idea started by Mr. Suresh Ediga, who's based in New Jersey, USA. And since then, we've called the idea was simple, that we call as many MPs and ask them what their stand on RTI amendments were, and also to tell them that look, as citizens, as your constituents, we want you to vote against them because they're anti-people. They basically curb every freedom, and partly also because the government had assured the parliament that they would not amend the RTI Act. So that we've called over 250 MPs, and we've had a variety of responses and everything. But what came as a breath of fresh air for us among all this campaigning, frustration, stonewalling, was that one letter from Mr. Jai Panda that went out to the Speaker of Lok Sabha, asking her to stall the vote and refer it to a parliamentary standing committee, and ask the Speaker to refer it to Parliamentary Standing Committee and for wider consultation and debate on it, and not hurry things up. And that letter is now public, and after that letter, a lot of other MPs have also come out in the open and sort of said that yes, this is the right course to take, right way to go. So I was thrilled rather when the office of Jai Panda and Mr. Jai Panda himself agreed to this hangout within matter of days actually, and really at some point I would want to talk about how responsive the office of Jai Panda has been, and something that it could be a model for citizen and MP engagement. But let's just hop over directly to Mr. Jai Panda and ask him, so your letter is now public, we know what you've talked about, but could you explain your own personal stand on the issue of amendments and why you opposing the amendments when all the parties have sort of are singing from the same hymn sheet on this? So we'd like to hear your perspective, sir.
Thank you. I have essentially the same kind of feelings as all of you do, and many concerned Indians who are worried that our freedoms are being taken away. And I've held similar positions on issues like internet freedom, for example, on Section 66A of the IT Act, and I proposed changes to the very antiquated Sedition Act, which was used against cartoonists. So this is something that is consistent with the positions I have been taking. If you see the op-ed I have written in today's Times of India, my position is that these two judgments that have come, the Supreme Court judgment that convicted MPs and MLAs must be disqualified, and the Information Commission's ruling that political parties must be included in RTI, these have come as major disruptions to business as usual, or I should say major disruptions to politics as usual. And I think as elected representatives, we have two choices. Either we can adapt to these higher standards of public life, higher standards of probity that are now being demanded by these two rulings, or we can fight back. And unfortunately, you can see that there's a lot of fight back happening. Now, Bhanupriya, you talked about the government, and as an opposition member, I have many things against the government. But unfortunately, on this particular issue, it is not about this government alone, because almost the entire opposition is hand in glove with the government in trying to modify RTI. So somebody has to speak up, and when I realized nobody else was doing it, I said I must, and I must be also candid that I have, my party has given me the leeway. I initially did not have the support of my party, but as I have been posting from time to time, I have been taking it up in my intra-party meetings, and we have taken a decision to oppose this. Till now, we should not sit pretty, because although the issue is getting some traction, it is far from getting resolved. So we must remain concerned as citizens. We must try to keep this issue alive, and we must ensure that it just doesn't get road-rolled past us.
Now, isn't that music to the ears of people who've been calling up MPs and have been hearing, why they should be exempt from the RTI Act. And I'm glad, sir. One of my questions later would have been how difficult or easy was it for you to get traction within your own parliamentary party, and you cleared it up, and so we can save some time on that. But also on the, I did read your TOI op-ed piece this morning, and one of the things you mentioned is that instead of increasing transparency and decriminalizing our political systems, political parties may be relying on nuances that have some merit. Now, from your perspective, what would those nuances be?
I'll tell you what those nuances are. You know, I have taken a position that we must not amend the RTI now because we do not have other adequate provisions. But the reality is other democracies do not include their parties, political parties in RTI. I've done some research. The UK has a Freedom of Information Act and political parties are not included. And US also, as far as I can make out, their Freedom of Information Act, political parties are not included. So these are some of the nuances that politicians and others are using to argue that political parties should not be under RTI. So I have actually taken a stand that in that case, we must have proper and more stringent standards in the appropriate constitutional body. So I have advocated that the Election Commission must be empowered with new legislation to give it RTI-like authority. It must have the same effect. That means all political parties' funding details, which currently they do actually they are supposed to submit to Election Commission, it must be mandatorily made public so that it has the same effect as being in RTI. Second, they must be audited. Today they are not audited. Political parties submit all kinds of fiction. That must change. And the third thing is the EC is actually an excellent institution. Since the days of TN session, it has done great service to India, but it still lacks some teeth. In a particular case, the government has argued in court that even when a candidate or a party submits false information to the EC is not empowered to do anything about it. That must change. And if we can make these changes, then I'm okay with not having political parties under RTI, because you will have the same powers and more powers in some constitutional body. But until we empower the EC to have these powers, I don't think we should amend RTI. Now, some people have another nuance. Some people have pointed out is that there are some other technical flaws, and they are coming up with some legal analysis of political parties not being not being the right bodies to be in RTI. Now, we can go into all kinds of legal niceties, but as I said, something is better than nothing. It may be imperfect, but today this is the only thing we have which is going to force higher standards of transparency on politics. And unless we can come up with a better, more compelling alternative, we have no business removing this. So that's my stand. But there are other nuances that some people are using. My argument has been the nuances may have some merit, but the core issue is this is a turning point in the history of our democracy, and we have a chance to actually upgrade our politics, to make it more transparent, to make it more respectable, to bring it in line with the standards followed in most democracies. Or we have the option of being status quoist and fighting to continue and perpetuate the same old system, and I don't want to be part of the latter.
It's very interesting that you mention the Western democracies, and those standards are something that we should be aspiring to, and how the comparison between with Western democracies has been used to sort of argue that, well, UK and the US do not have FOI, political parties under their FOI. I have been doing some research of my own, as I'm also a global campaigner on transparency, and on the Freedom of Information rating, or an RTI rating body has suggested in the top 10 countries that have the best RTI system in the world, hardly any Western democracy figures in that. So the countries are Serbia, India, Slovenia, Liberia, El Salvador, Mexico, Antigua, Ukraine, Croatia, and Ethiopia. And among the bottom 10 are some of those Western democracies that we keep sort of talking about: Italy, Germany, Austria, Belgium. Spain does not even have an access to information law. So my own thinking is, and I think some of our campaigners, most of our campaigners would agree, that that if there is, and as you said, if there is an opportunity that presents itself to sort of herald a new era in transparency by bringing political parties under it, then why should we wait for a time when Western democracies finally get up and realize this? Why can't we be leaders in that, in setting up that system? And as I said earlier some time ago, that there's the Open Government Partnership, which is pushing even Western governments towards greater transparency. So India has not even joined it. So I think there should be move towards greater transparency and not less. And it's very interesting that you argue about the Election Commission getting those powers, which is good until such a time. But even after, let's say, Election Commission gets those powers of auditing and finding out about the disclosures and penalizing about false disclosures and everything, do you not think that the RTI even then should apply to political parties? Because as a citizen, beyond financial transparency, I might like to know other things, and I would perhaps as a citizen want to know, okay, not intra-party matters pertaining to strategy and everything, which perhaps I'd like to know, but fine. But as a citizen, I would like to know other things, which perhaps the disclosures that may pertain to the Election Commission may not provide me. So, do you think differently?
Look, I think we are trying to cross too many bridges at one time. These are all hypothetical because there is nothing on the table to actually enhance the powers of EC today. So today the immediate battle we have to fight is that RTI should not be amended. Now, once there is a compelling alternative provided, then I think it is worth having a debate because you could come into the issue of overlapping authorities of different constitutional bodies and things like that. But as I said, what matters is the principle, and I agree with all the principles you've just enunciated about having transparency about political parties. Now, about being an RTI, one of the other nuances which has been argued is that certain intra-party matters need not be disclosed to the public, and I think that is debatable. I think we need to debate the issues of what aspects of a political party ought to be in the public domain, and if there are any aspects which ought not to be. Clearly, finances must be in the public domain. Some people say candidate selection should not be. I don't agree. I think candidate selection should be a completely transparent and open thing. But I don't know. This debate is still in very early days. So I think we should have a national debate about that. Some people claim that Section 8 of the RTI does give that protection to RTI, to political parties. But I've gone through it. Section 8 basically gives protection for things like copyrights and things like national secrets and all that. I think perhaps with the amendment of Section 8, we could have political parties in RTI as well as have all these items under EC, as long as we ensure that there are not overlapping authorities. Because if you have overlapping authorities, then you could have turf wars and turf battles. But as I said, in principle, I think we are on the same page. The question is, let's not try to solve a theoretical future problem until we ward off the immediate danger today. And then we can have this national debate and find the answer where the majority of us are on board.
Yes, that I think is a very sensible thing to do to focus the issue at hand. And I think I did sneak a smile from Anjali when you talked about that candidate selection process should be public as well, and also when you were talking about Section 8. And so perhaps this is just the right time that we go over to Anjali and talk to her about the civil society perspective on all these issues that have been raised by the political parties on why they should be exempt from it. So Anjali, what is the civil society perspective on this, and what are we saying to the political parties?
Sure. Let me begin by saying that when we look at the intention of the Right to Information Act, I think it's critical to remember that it was not really just to seek transparency from the government. It's about having an informed citizenry and citizenry informed about governance in general. And if we look at the ground reality in India today, we know what a critical role political parties are playing in our governance today, even if we look at what is happening in the parliament. And therefore, I think that as a member of a civil society, as citizens, what people are interested in knowing from political parties is extremely critical. If they want to know how their lawmakers are taking decisions, and we know that there is Schedule 10 of the Constitution, under which again political parties are playing a very critical role. People have several questions that they have of the political parties that they would like answers to. And I think a lot of them are very, very legitimate questions. And a lot of them are very, very important if we want to even move towards participatory democracy. And I think that is really at the heart of, the rationale or the reason why we needed a Right to Information Act in the first place. It's been very, very refreshing, like you mentioned, Bhanupriya, to listen to Mr. Panda. We've been talking to lots of members of parliament across party lines, and it's really sort of very heartening to know that there are people in the parliament who sort of are open to discussion, who are open to looking at nuances in all of these matters, and are not just saying that we do not want to be transparent or accountable and want to run away from that. And I think that's what sort of also brings us to what this whole debate is really in a sense highlighting, and the sort of signal that is conveying to citizens in general in the country, which is that wherever political parties and the political class as a whole is being asked to be transparent or is being asked to be accountable, they're sort of, joining ranks, and they're coming together to scuttle any such move. Now, I think one thing which a lot of us who work on the ground, Venkat is here, Rakesh is here, and I'm sure they might agree, is that people are really worried why any legislation for which there has been a lot of debate and discussion, there has been a lot of public support. For example, we've seen a lot of support coming for legislations like the Lokpal, the Grievance Redress Bill, the Whistleblower Protection Bill. None of those seem to get this sort of unanimity amongst political parties, and suddenly citizens find that whether it's the Supreme Court order which Mr. Panda referred to, or it is this Right to Information CIC order, suddenly there is this great solidarity amongst political parties, and that is really sort of leading to a great problem in terms of an already, we already have a credibility crisis, if I may use that term, in terms of the political class and the way people are perceiving politicians today. And this is only contributing to that, which to a lot of people is very, very bad news for democracy. Because in a democracy, we cannot have a situation where people who we elect are sort of painted with the same brush. Everybody talks about a class of politicians and says all of them are corrupt or looking out for their own interests. That cannot, cannot bode well for a democracy. And I think it's in that context that this entire discussion needs to be sort of contextualized and seen. Mr. Panda talked about the need for greater transparency and accountability even to the Election Commission, and I totally agree. I think one of the reasons why people have gone and this appeal has even come into the Information Commission is that people are finding that there is really very, very little information that they are able to access from political parties in today's day and age. We do have the right to access information from political parties even if they are not public authorities, because Section 2F of the Right to Information Act states that any private body also has to give information to people. Any information that they give to the government and is accessible to the government under any law can be accessed by citizens. Now, by that clause itself, people can actually access information from political parties. But the reason why people are feeling the need to actually go out and ask political parties directly is that in the current situation, neither the ECI nor the Income Tax Department seem to have the information that people really want and people feel is critical for them to have to engage with political parties. For example, there is a cap of 20,000 rupees in terms of financial contributions, and anything below 20,000 doesn't have, it doesn't have to be in a sense declared with the name of the donor and so on. Now, if we do know that people are interested in that information as well, because they feel that somewhere that connects to a lot of the financial sort of problems which are happening in the political system today. So there are a lot of things which political parties need to be transparent about, which people want to have access to, but they cannot under the current system. Now, it's absolutely right that there are Western democracies where there are laws to regulate political parties. There are laws which actually require political parties to give out a lot more information than political parties are required to in India today. And we do certainly need to talk about electoral reforms. We need to talk about regulation or transparency of political parties. But I again agree with Mr. Panda that we cannot sort of let people lose this opportunity of using the Right to Information Act and sort of accessing information in the absence of all of those reforms happening. And of course, while we would love to engage with those reforms as well, but I think it's critical at the moment to ensure that the Right to Information Act is not amended. There are of course several concerns that political parties have tabled, one of which I think Mr. Panda referred to also when he said that candidature and how do we select candidates. And I tend to agree with Mr. Panda that is information that I think citizens legitimately ought to know. If there is a political party which seeks my vote on the fact that they are secular, or they seek my vote on the fact that they believe in women's rights, then I think I have a right to know why somebody who doesn't have these credentials is given a candidate by that political party. I ought to have the right to know that. There would be several things, and I think that it would be unfair to say that all the concerns that have been listed by political parties are illegitimate or they're trivial. There are issues of competitive interests. After all, political parties are competing with each other. We do want the political process to be a strong one. We do want them to be able to get protection for their competitive interests. I do think that discussion and debate could lead us to a much better place on some of these concerns as well. Section 8, of course, has already been mentioned. It talks about 8(1)D specifically, talks about competitive interest. And I have personally seen several orders from the Information Commission where it's not just for commercial entities, but even entities which are not commercial in nature, where they have sought this sort of exemption, and they have got it because they've said that competitive interest is being hurt and that information hasn't been made public. As far as the RTI study that you mentioned, Bhanupriya, I think that one of the major sort of one of the big things in the Indian law is that it really covers all arms of it covers the executive, the judiciary, and the legislature, and I think probably that's why it finds the second position in that particular survey that you talked about. And I think that in a democracy, we call ourselves the largest democracy. It really requires a lot of thought in terms of how we want to make political parties accountable. I think political parties do need to understand that while they are of course accountable to the ECI, but finally the Right to Information Act actually just makes them accountable to the people of the country and transparent to the people of the country. And it's really in that context that we need to sort of this thing. I can see that Bhanupriya wants me to stop, so maybe I can come back later if there is time.
I think we might have just lost Bhanupriya. I'm not getting a feed from her. Could we go over to Mr. Venkatesh Nayak, please? Venkatesh, your microphone's on mute.
Okay. Originally, I was asked to speak on the amendments that the government is proposing to the Whistleblower Protection Bill, which is also pending in the Rajya Sabha. Before I go into that, I'm quite tempted to comment on a couple of things that have been discussed by my previous esteemed co-panelists. I would like to start by congratulating Mr. Panda for taking such a bold step, which is very different from what most of the other political parties have been doing. And in fact, he's actually shown that he is a people's representative because he has heeded to public opinion, and I think that we need leaders like the representatives. Now, Bhavya in her West Democracy gave us examples of countries that have access to information laws which do not cover political parties. I would say before West, let us look north. Our own neighbor, Nepal, passed its access to information law in 2007, 2 years after the Right to Information Act. And remember, let us also remember that they became a constitutional democracy from an absolute monarchy only 10 years ago. Can you hear me clearly? Or is there a problem with the audio?
Yes, it's fine now. You could go ahead. It was just a little bit of a problem, but now it's fine.
Okay. Okay. So as I was saying, Nepal, which was initially an absolute monarchy, became a constitutional democracy and 10 years later passed the Right to Information Act. And it includes political parties within the list of public bodies that have to give information to people directly. This is one example. Another example is that of Poland, which passed its access to information law much earlier, where political parties were included in their list of public bodies when people ask for information directly. Now, these are the two examples that we have in the world, so we could actually vie for the third position in the list of countries that have passed laws that cover political parties. Let's take the example of Mexico, which is slightly different. The reason why I mentioned Mexico is because A, it's a country with as many diversities as India has, and also the Indian Right to Information Act is inspired from their access to information law, particularly in terms of the categories of information that must be proactively disclosed by public authorities. Now, they have some very interesting decisions from their electoral institute, which is their equivalent of our election commission, where the electoral institute has required political parties to give a range of information about their finances, and not just finances, but also their intra-party matters such as salaries paid to their office bearers. That information is accessible to people under the Right to Information Act, even though the Mexican access to information law does not cover political parties directly. So there are enough examples if we want to look around. But the question is, just like Gandhiji said, I'll keep my windows open so that the wind from all directions can come in. Can we actually open our minds to look at these examples and then have a major public debate and discussion on what is it that we require in our Right to Information Act, who should be covered, who should avoid, and what reason. Now, regarding selection of candidates, I have only one point, and then I'll move over to talking about the Whistleblower Protection Act. I would like to really ask this one simple question. When I go to the electronic voting machine and see the names of candidates who have declared on an affidavit at the time of filing their nominations that they have criminal offenses against their names, serious offenses like murder, rape, arson, committing communal violence, I would really want to ask the question of political parties as to on what basis did you choose this candidate from amongst the pool of so many other eligible people who are members of your party. In fact, you will be surprised to know that soon after the Supreme Court judgment on the voters' right to know the background of candidates contesting elections to parliament and legislatures became law. That is, after the government had challenged it, even at that point of time, opposition parties gang together to nullify the Supreme Court order. But that whole initiative was struck down, and the law has remained now. People get to know what are the financial antecedents, criminal antecedents, and educational background of electoral candidates. We started this process of election watch, which today has become a nationwide phenomenon, in association with the Association for Democratic Reforms, and we found out that I would not like to name the political party or the person here because they are not represented, but it is a major political party whose elected member of parliament had a charge of rape against him, and he was sitting in parliament making laws. And after a few years of this revelation, he was convicted of rape. Thankfully, he did not get elected in the next elections. So I would really want to ask this question whenever such, and the percentages are all available in the public domain on the basis of data given by the candidates themselves, the elected candidates themselves, as to how many criminal cases and what kinds of criminal cases they have against them. So we want to ask the parties, what was the basis for choosing these people? Was it just electoral politics, or are some ethics and constitutional values also involved in making these kinds of choices? So, I mean, these are some of the things that I want to say in reaction to the discussion so far. Now, the Whistleblower Protection Bill. This is also a bill that is pending in Parliament for a long time, and it is a novel bill for several reasons. I'll go into that a little later. Just a bit of a history of the bill. People would remember that public servants like Manjunath and Satyendra Dubey, who were employees of public sector organizations, complained about criminal offenses like corruption and diversion of petroleum products and money changing hands in an illegal manner in their public authorities. They went as high up as the Prime Minister's office with their complaints, and soon after that, I don't know who murdered them. Those cases, what conclusions they reached, it's not very well known in the public domain. So after that, the government came up with the Whistleblower Protection Policy in 2004. It has a very longish name, so I'll not go into that. In abbreviated fashion, we can call it Whistleblower Policy. And now, in 2011, the government introduced
Venkat,
the
sorry,
Whistleblower
can
Bill.
Can I ask you?
Name. Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Can I ask you to just briefly explain what the problems with the bill are? Simply because, I mean, of course, we'd love to listen to everything, but we also have to take questions from the audience who have been tweeting relentlessly and would want to ask all of us or all of you people what on this. So can you just quickly in bullet points tell us what the problem? And I'm sure this will come up even during questions.
Sure. The Whistleblower Bill is primarily brought in to protect people who complain with knowledge of offences having been committed in public authorities. The bill also seeks to protect them from victimization. Now, the single biggest problem with the Whistleblower Protection Bill that is pending in the Rajya Sabha is it does not define what is victimization. Is it something like if it is an officer of a public body that making the complaint, is he being demoted? Is he being subject to disciplinary action or some physical or mental harms being caused? Is he subject to harassment? This is not clearly identified, and despite the parliamentary committee saying such a definition should be included. The second issue is very high constitutional officers like that of the Prime Minister, the Chief Justices of the Supreme Court and the High Courts. These are made, the incumbents of these offices are made competent authorities to receive and order inquiries into complaints of whistleblowing. However, these offices themselves are not subject to complaints being filed by people about wrongdoing that happens in those offices. So there is no mechanism for, let's say, investigating complaints that occur in the offices of these very high constitutional offices. That is another lacuna. A third lacuna is, while the original version of the bill gave protection for government officials from prosecution under the RTI Act if they blew the whistle by submitting documents as proof of their complaint, that provision has been taken away in the amendments that the government is proposing. Now, this is very dangerous because the whole purpose of a whistleblower protection law is to give the whistleblower a safer option to silence so that he or she speaks out and makes a disclosure about some offense or some wrongdoing that is committed, which has to be disclosed in the public interest. Now, if you threaten people with
sorry, Venkatesh, I have to be a bit harsh here. Venkatesh, sorry, I really have to be a bit harsh. I really don't want to sound like those anchors on TV
Can
and
I just
stuff.
make one very quick point? I want to talk. Sure.
Yeah, sorry. We've just got literally 20 minutes left, and we have to take questions from the audience, and we have to get Rakesh to talk about, which is very important, to talk about on the ground what the power of RTI has been as somebody who's filed thousands of, or rather hundreds of RTI applications, one of which was to expose a scam of a global university being allotted hundreds of acres of land. So Rakesh, can you tell us the power of RTI as you see from the ground, and why it shouldn't be amended? And you have 2 minutes.
The basic premise is that people have a right to know. So unlike any other act, this act has given the real power to citizens. As we see, like I keep saying, this is probably one act which has given us earned that respect. There are government servants today who stand up, who gives that respect to citizens, and somebody goes and files an application. And it wouldn't be an overstatement if I can say most bureaucrats today think twice before writing any comment on the file, because they are now 2 years, 3 years, whenever that is, any citizen can come and ask. So this has given a sense of empowerment to people, even not just to the urban middle class who are technically savvy, etc., but even to the rural people who probably are semi-literate or illiterate, right from Kashmir to Kanyakumari, wherever you go, as in people are using it to expose scams, to get services on time, all that thing. And secondly, so taking away this power or the right to question political parties is going to be a huge beating to the morale of citizens in terms of how they have been using this act. To also add to what the other panelists have been saying, 2 quick points, because there is also a great, we could say, perception, or people think that most big corporates influence policy. And in AP, we have seen that the same corporate house has given donations to all the existing political parties. So I'm saying this needs to be exposed. People need to know who are giving donations. Are they influencing policy unduly? So all that people need to know. So if it is so that they are just answerable to an EC or some IT body, I'm not sure how the common citizens can go and approach. Even going by that standard, if you look at the latest figures, out of the about 1,500 registered parties, only 100 of them have submitted their contribution reports to the EC. Only 100 of them have given their audit reports to the EC. So I'm saying, not even 10% of them are complying to the existing rules, which the EC is just standing idle and doing nothing. So I'm saying RTI, yes, if there are legitimate concerns, there are exemptions existing in the act, they can exercise that. But just blanket removing political parties is a very bad sign. And the one and only right that people have in this country probably to stand up and question government, or earn that respect from public servants, I don't think it should not be amended at any point of time.
Thank you, Rakesh. That was brilliant and succinct, and you did put the power of right to information, which is why our audience that's watching should know why this act should not be amended. Now, the good thing about technology like Google Hangouts and is that moderators like me need not act like the who's of the world barking and shouting. But also the good thing is that a lot of audience have been tweeting. It's a very interactive process. A lot of audience have been tweeting, they're sending us messages on Facebook and so on and so forth, which they would like to ask Mr. Panda and all the panelists. And I think it's a great opportunity. One of the ways that they can directly engage with their MPs, about which I'd love to go on forever. But I'd like now to bring in Aarti and Anshul, who've been very helpfully collecting all these these questions, and they'll now direct them towards all of you. And yes, I'm sure the audience would like to get involved. Thank you.
Over to you, Anshul.
Thank you, Aarti. Good evening, Mr. Panda. It's been wonderful hearing you. It's very motivating, knowing that somebody's standing strong against the RTI amendments, and also the other panelists. I'll quickly move to the questions that we've received through our community at Youth Ki Awaaz. They've been pretty much around how the political class is behaving and reacting to the amendment. And the first question and the most prominent one actually that we received was that apart from all the tweeting that's happening and all the comments that are taking place, the petitions that are happening on websites like change.org or Twitter or Facebook, what other measures could young people or the public actually engage in to make sure that these amendments do not come in place? So apart from just voicing yourself or just creating chatter around it, what do you think, Mr. Panda, could be the various ways that we as people could engage in to make sure that they don't come in?
Well, that's a very, very good question. I think the basic problem is a prejudice among the political class that people like us don't matter, that we are the minority, people like us don't vote. And there is some truth to that. India is one of the countries where as people go above a certain income standard and they become middle class, they actually vote less and less. Whereas in other countries, you find that people who are middle class actually have a much higher voter turnout. And it is the inner city poor who are sort of less engaged with the system. So we need to change this impression. And we have seen this impression change on certain issues. For example, on corruption, there have been agitations where people, you saw hundreds of thousands of people take to the streets. And these are middle class people. These are people who are maybe aspiring to be middle class. But the common thing was these are outraged Indians who sent a message loud and clear to the political class that this can't be ignored. And similar things happened when we had a spate of violence against women. I think also in the political class, people are beginning to recognize that technology can be a facilitator and a force multiplier, because some of these street protests have been facilitated through social media, have been facilitated through SMS and other such technologies. So I think we need to take the message to the political class that this is not something that we do only in our drawing rooms. As long as there is a message that we only do this in the drawing rooms, we are not going to turn out to vote, we will not matter, then this viewpoint can be ignored. We must have protest rallies. Some people sort of make fun of that, say that you hold candles for a weekend and then you forget about the issue. And we must disprove that. We must disprove that we forget about this issue and that we keep a sustained pressure on the system. The other thing is, this should not only be an urban phenomenon. We should take the message, actually, as one of the panelists was pointing out, it is the poor and the disenfranchised who actually suffer the most at the hands of a system where you have such massive leakages. There is one estimate that only 27% of PDS funds actually reaches the people. So the poor must be made aware of their rights, and they must be engaged. And if we can do that, if we can take this dialogue, this discussion beyond a Google Hangout, beyond SMS, beyond our drawing rooms to a larger debate, I think it will have a huge impact.
Right, and taking from that question, as you mentioned, that it's important to take these voices inside the parliament to the other, ministers who are in the cabinet right now or who are in the Lok Sabha. Quickly asking another question, you've been tweeting yourself, you got Dr. Tharoor in the loop, you even tweeted to Narendra Modi, a lot of others. How have they and the others that you are engaging with, honestly speaking, a lot of people are seeing you as the public interface for somebody they can easily engage with and talk to the rest of the people in the parliament. So how have the other ministers who you've engaged with till now reacted to what all the people are saying from your perspective and from whatever you've told them?
Well, one of the names you mentioned responded through Twitter and said that Jay Panda is an individual MP, but most likely his party won't be with it. But I'm glad to report that I have got positive traction in my party, and the stand I have taken initially was an individual one, but today my stand is backed up by discussions in our parliamentary party meeting. So that is a good development. But the BJD is one among dozens of parties, and although we are one of the, we probably are seventh or so in size among the parties, that's not enough. We need to take this message out. Now, some of the major national leaders have huge followings on Twitter, and I think they're not getting badgered enough by their followers. So I think you need to engage with these followers. And I don't mean trolling. I don't mean that you hassle them or troll them. I mean badger them in a good way. I think you need to engage sort of separately with separate dialogues with followers of people like Shri Narendra Modi, Shri Shashi Tharoor, Ajay Maken, RPN Singh. These are people who are getting they're getting increasingly active on Twitter and Facebook. And I think their followers taking up this issue with them regularly, rather than just activists and organizations, is going to have much more impact on them.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Panda. Over to you, Aarti. Aarti?
Yeah. Hello. Thanks, Anshul. It has been fascinating listening to all of the pertinent arguments that have been and the reasoning put forward here. I have one question from Mr. Panda, from the kind of discussions that must be ongoing now within the political class. What exactly are the political class not agreeing to? Is there some sort of a middle ground that people are coming to, or is it like, we're just not willing to come under the ambit of the RTI? Is there a nuance to this, to the discussions that are going on among the political class today?
I would like to say two things here. First of all, I think we have a problem that many people who today hold important political positions have come up through this existing system. And this is the system they're familiar with and they're comfortable with. So there is a status quoism. There's a resistance to change in any field or any organization. So that is part of the problem. But there is also a genuine problem. Because, we must look at this problem not only through the prism of RTI, which we are trying to strengthen and preserve, but what other impact does it have? The fact is, unless you tackle things like campaign financing, unless you tackle things like political funding, parties have a genuine problem because the ways in which they are used to doing business will become unsustainable the minute you make it so transparent. So we have to also find solutions to those problems and not just think that the stick is the only answer. We must have both carrot and stick. So unless we can suggest alternatives and keep egging them on in the right direction, you will have resistance. But I think the best thing about all of this is that there is a national mood emerging, and that national mood cannot be denied for much longer. It may be denied for another year or two or another election or so. But I see a positive trend. A little earlier, I think it was Mr. Venkatesh who was pointing out that when disclosures of criminal background were required, so many parties opposed it. But today it's a norm, it's a fact of life. I think 5 years from now, more disclosures and more transparency will also become the norm. In a democracy, things take a little time, but we have to provide solutions as well as enforce more transparency.
Thank you, Mr. Panda. And another follow-up question that has come up also on the point that you raised in terms of how the Election Commission should be empowered and how that should be used for political parties to be able to disclose their accounts to until the time that they come under the RTI Act. A question that we've got on the alternative is that there is a reader asking if that voluntary disclosures are fine, but are they adequate? I mean, do you think that if the citizens want to know answers from political parties in case voluntary disclosures are inadequate, are there instruments to do that? What is your position on that?
I wasn't talking about voluntary disclosure. The only condition on which I would agree to amending RTI so that political parties are not included is that absolutely similar provisions are there where mandatory disclosure is there of political parties exactly the same as would be under RTI. So I'm not talking about voluntary disclosure. In fact, even while preserving RTI, there are certain things we need to do to EC. We have talked about auditing of party funds. Audits are not mandatory, and yet parties get income tax exemption. First thing we should change is you cannot get income tax exemption unless you are properly audited. Now, not that audits can't be manipulated, but then the chances of fraud will become much less as compared to today. We must also, just to go back a little bit to an earlier question, we must actually give very comprehensible and logical answers to some of the doubts that are being raised. So somebody has raised a doubt about political parties not being public because they don't take a majority of their funds from government, and you can argue what is majority. But then what you can't argue is in the Lok Sabha we have passed a draft of the Lokpal bill which describes political parties as public, and we then can't take a contradictory stand that it's okay to be public under Lokpal, but it's not okay to be public under RTI. So we must point out such contradictions. And I just want to quickly say something. I don't want that this discussion should be only about RTI. RTI is a very important aspect, but there is a broad engagement happening on political reform. And the other aspect that I talked in my op-ed today is about convicted MPs and MLAs. And that is an equally important thing. Because an average citizen does not have the right to contest an election if she or he is convicted, and yet we are trying to oppose the Supreme Court judgment which disqualifies convicted MPs and MLAs. But again, there is a real concern, and we must address that. The real concern is if an MP gets convicted of a lower crime, something like public disorder, which many MPs participate in protests and all that, and they are going for an appeal. Appeal can take years. And so they're using that as justification to say that they should not get disqualified. But my answer is, solve the problem. The problem is, why should an appeal take years? Now, we have got very good results from fast-track courts. Whichever fast-track courts we have set up in the last 10 years, they have a disposal rate of 84%, which is fantastically higher than the normal judicial process. And even though all citizens should have access to fast justice, let us provide a special privilege to elected people that any criminal cases against elected people, MPs, MLAs, Zilla Parishads, etc., they will get to fast track court with 90 days disposal. And if we can do that, there's no reason for them to say that, well, appeals are getting delayed, so we must continue. So we must engage on finding solutions and not just wielding the stick. We must find carrots also.
Thank you, Mr. Khan.
I think, sorry, can I just quickly jump in? I mean, the whole question of reform and the amendments, as I said, it seems to be the season of amendments. The RP Act's also coming up, and Mr. Panda, specifically, as I've been following his work and his writings, is a strong opponent of that, and he's been crusading, perhaps in a very lone manner, as he's been on this amendment bill as well. And I'd like to know, Mr. Panda, how as citizens we can sort of amplify your voice in the parliament, and how we can spread the word about it, how we can engage with others about it. Sorry for jumping in, Aarti.
I think Bhanupriya, you and the other panelists here have already been doing a very good job. I've been seeing posts and tweets about your engagement with other MPs, and I'm seeing that a number of them are beginning to agree in private that they sympathize, and they are restricted by party whips. Now, I could talk to you again at length about how party whips need to be changed, because that is one of the things that is distorting the political process. I have also written about that, but that is a topic for another day. I think you should do more of what you're doing, more engagement with the MPs, and I think to try and the things that you're doing are correct. You just need to increase the quantity of such engagements. There is no other way around it, and I'm afraid that's all I can say. And as far as being a lone crusader, as they said, a journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. So let's hope we'll have companions along the way, not too long from now.
Aarti, you can go ahead and ask another question.
Okay, so this is to Anjali actually, where readers on the alternative have requested where they could be, how they could be part of the whole public consultations process around. I mean, there's going to be a string of, hopefully, if tomorrow's discussions go well in Lok Sabha, there could be a way for people to participate in the public consultations that will be held therein. What are the various ways in which people be a part of this process, and what action can they take on the ground?
Yeah. No, in fact, one of the things which has been really worrying about these amendments, apart from the nature of amendments themselves, is the haste in which they are being pushed through. And in fact, one of the things that have been demanded by civil society groups and people has been that there should be wide consultation about the amendments, so that a better understanding can develop amongst people and between people and political parties and the political class. The NCPRI had held an open forum where we had invited the 6 national parties that are part of, that are covered under the CIC order. Unfortunately, representatives from only one came, but there hasn't really been an engagement so far, an open engagement where people and politicians can talk about this. What everybody has been pushing for is that the bill should be referred to a standing committee or a select committee. And in the current legislative process, that is the one place where citizens can actually engage. They can come in, they can be consulted, and they can give their point of view. We are really hopeful, and we are grateful to even Mr. Panda that he's written to the Speaker. We've all been saying that there should be the bill should be referred to the standing committee, and that's when the process is started. Then citizens have a chance to go and depose before the standing committee, give their points of view, and consultation can happen. And I think the more the citizens who write to the standing committee, if the bill is referred to one, the greater public pressure we build, it's going to be more effective for us to put our point of view across. And I'm sure that will need to be done both on the social media and on the ground. And I'm sure citizens and groups will be working towards doing that.
Thank you, Anjali. Considering the history of RTI and how it has come about after so much hard work from citizens and so much push from citizens, I think it's great that that there are so many possibilities that we can actually engage in on the process on the ground on an ongoing basis. So hoping that there is more of that from the NCPRI. Over to you, Bhanupriya, on questions being raised from the volunteers at the MP Callathon.
Yes, I think one of the questions that has been raised is this whole process of engagement around with the MPs. So we've seen massive stonewalling and whatever, but when a lone MP has stood up, we've also seen a few others sort of, if you like, crawl out of woodworks and sort of support, if not very publicly, some have. TMC is one example who suddenly seems to have changed its stand. So I think a lot of those the Callathon volunteers who live abroad largely, but a lot of Indian people living in India have joined in as well subsequently. So I think one of the questions they would have wanted to ask is how best can we engage with MPs on different other policy issues, is there a place for constant engagement, or is it just one or two MPs who have friendly offices, who are friendly in nature, who are on Twitter and so on, that one can engage with?
Was that question to me?
Yes, Mr. Panda, that question was for you.
I think the pressures of modern communications are beginning to tell, and I think you will find more and more MPs accessible, more on Twitter, more on social media. But it's a gradual process. I don't think you can expect anything to happen suddenly. I want to continue from a theme I was speaking about just a few minutes ago, which is that our parties have become very hierarchical over the past few decades, which was not the case earlier and which is not the case in other democracies. The power of the whip is extremely strong, and MPs have very little freedom to act on their own conscience. They have to be guided by their party's whip and party's decision. Today, a very important MP today told me in the Central Hall that he sympathizes with me, and he is in fact going to speak in Parliament if the occasion arises, sympathizing and supporting my stand, but will obviously ultimately vote along the party line. So I think the lesson from that is we must give extra importance to engaging with the leaderships of the party. Individual MPs, if we can gather support, is great, but the whips can actually only be decided at the top tiers of the parties, and extra effort must be made for that.
Thank you, Mr. Panda. I'm aware that we have run over about an hour of our hangout, and you will have many more engagements to carry out for the evening. So can I just take a minute to sort of appeal to all those who are watching us and or tweeting us and so on, that look, the danger is not yet over. There may be some ray of hope, as the article in Hindu suggested today, but we don't know yet, as Anjali was talking earlier. So we need to step up, continue our fight, and if you like, amplify the voices that are being raised in the Parliament. And so, as I said, what are the things that we as citizens can do to sort of tide over this? One of the things that we, as Mr. Panda has done, is to write to the Speaker ourselves. There's a petition going around that the bill should be referred to the Standing Committee, to a parliamentary panel, and not rush in haste. So that bill is up on Youth Ki Awaaz, the Alternative, and all our Twitter feeds and everywhere. So just please go ahead to the change.org and sign that petition. Also, one very important thing, as has been pointed out in this whole debate, was to engage with your MPs. We engage with them. It was a fun experience. It was an annoying experience. Sometimes it was a mixture of experiences. So, but at the end of it, I would say that if we had not engaged with our MPs, then perhaps I would not have gone and checked Mr. Panda's Twitter feed and seen his stand against RTI amendments and got in touch with his office and, you know, closely worked with his office to sort of amplify his efforts and make him known about our efforts and everything. So engaging with our MPs is important. And finally, about what Aarti had talked about, this act, and I keep saying this very, very passionately every time, that this act was not got after 1 or 2 days of struggle or 1 or 2 years of struggle. It was got by the struggle of poor workers and peasants who sort of gave up their day's wages to go and ask information from the government. So we can take some time out of our lives and campaign against it, and you know, and not let those people down, basically. So and if we can set an example for a more transparent democracy, more transparent system, which the Western countries may not be yet. So let's go and show them the way. So let's both engage with our parliamentarians, with our own elected officials, but most important at the moment, let's just go sign that petition at change.org. Let's let the speaker hear all our collective voices and defer that or send the bill to the standing committee. I'll now pass it over to Aarti to sort of wrap it up completely.
Thank you, Bhanupriya. I'm wishing that we could have more of this engaging discussion going on, but we've just run out of time. And on the Twitter feeds of the Alternative, Youth Ki Awaaz, Bhanupriya's Twitter feed, we will be carrying all the updates that Mr. Jai Panda is putting out, and from his office, as well as the other campaigners at NCPRI and CHRI. So we're all just another appeal, like Bhanupriya said, to go and do our bit, sign the petition, and keep closely posted about all of that, all of the updates that might be happening over the next few days, and find ways to just be able to take action on the ground. Thank you so much, Mr. Jai Panda, for taking out an hour to be with us today, and it is an honor to have you on a citizens hangout, actually, and befitting probably to the RTI Act to have you address citizens in such an engaging manner. My thanks also to the other campaigners, Anjali Bharadwaj, Rakesh Reddy, and Venkatesh Naik, for taking out time amidst their busy schedules to be here and give us their perspective on the work that's been happening on the ground. Thank you, everybody, and the final broadcast will be available for viewing at the YouTube channel of The Alternative and shared among all the other YouTube feeds among our partners as well. Thank you so much. Over to you, Mr. Jai Panda, for closing remarks.
I think we have covered everything. I wish you all the best, all success in taking this campaign forward, in engaging, hopefully, millions of fellow citizens. I think we are beginning to get some traction, but it is far, far too early to be complacent. So a lot more work needs to be done. And I'd like to thank you all for making this special effort. I think for now, that's all. Jai Hind.
On that note, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us this evening.
Thank you.